I've always been the reliable one. At least that's what everyone said, relatives, coworkers, even my exes. It sounds like a compliment, right? Like a badge of honor. But what it really meant was, you'll pick up the pieces when the rest of us screw up. I'm 29 now, and if I'm honest, I don't even remember when it started. Probably when I was a teenager and my dad lost his job again. Or maybe when mom began using migraines as a reason to stay in bed for days. I'd come home from school to unpaid bills on the counter and my little brother, Nate, asking if dinner was just cereal again. So I stepped up. It was survival, not some noble gesture. By the time I hit 20, I was juggling community college and 2 part-time jobs while sending money home. When Dad drank away our rent, I covered it. When Nate flunked a semester, I paid for the retake. When Mom's car broke down, I dipped into my savings. They always said thank you, at least at first. But over time, it just became expected. A silent contract I never signed. And the weirdest part? No one ever asked if I was okay. Not once. Not when I had to sell my guitar to pay for Nate's books. Not when I missed my own birthday dinner because I was stuck on hold fixing Mom's suspended insurance. At first, it felt fulfilling. Like I had purpose. Like maybe if I held it all together long enough, they'd see me. Appreciate me. But appreciation never came. Just more requests. More guilt. More, well, Aaron will figure it out. They never even noticed the toll it took. My social life died years ago. I can't remember the last time I took a vacation. And emotionally, I was just numb. Like a vending machine that keeps dispensing no matter how many times someone kicks it. I think the moment it really hit me, the shift, was when I realized I wasn't helping anymore. I was enabling. My father had no reason to get sober. Nate had no reason to stand on his own. And my mom, bless her, had mastered weaponized helplessness. If I didn't pick up, she left voicemails laced with tears. If I didn't answer texts, she'd message my coworkers. But what broke me most was how casual it all felt to them. My exhaustion was background noise. So I stopped expecting gratitude. Stopped hoping for anything to change. And I made a quiet decision. I'd keep doing what I was doing for now. I'd still send money, still answer calls, still be the duct tape holding everyone together. But I would do it from behind a wall. Emotionally unplugged. Numb. Detached. Because somewhere along the line, I stopped being their son or brother. I became an ATM with a heartbeat. And deep down, I knew something had to give. My 29th birthday should have been uneventful. I didn't expect anything big. Just maybe a dinner that didn't involve me paying the bill. Maybe a card with some actual thought. Maybe someone asking how I was doing instead of what I could do for them. Instead, I got a lukewarm gathering at my parents' house. Microwave lasagna. A cake from the clearance rack. Nate showed up an hour late, high, and forgot to bring the gift he promised. My mom was distracted the whole time, scrolling through Facebook, while my dad half-heartedly manned the grill in the backyard like it was a chore someone forced on him. I sat there, surrounded by people I've carried for most of my adult life, pretending like everything was fine. Smiling, laughing at the dry jokes, nodding along while Nate went on about his next big plan that sounded exactly like the last 4 he never followed through on. And I could feel something tightening in my chest the entire time, like the edges of my patience were starting to fray. Then came the toast. We were all sitting around the table when Dad stood up, beer in hand, and said, to Aaron, our rock, our safety net, our personal bailout fund. A few chuckles. But then he added, if you disappeared tomorrow, I'm not even sure we'd notice, as long as the bills stayed paid. The table burst into laughter. I didn't. I looked at each of them. My mom laughed the hardest, wiping away a tear. Nate snorted into his drink. Even Aunt Rhonda, who barely knows me, gave a polite chuckle. No one said, hey, that's a little harsh. No one checked my face to see if I was okay. I just sat there, my fork frozen halfway to my mouth, and let the words hang in the air like smoke. That moment, it hollowed something out in me. I stood up, quietly, pushed my chair in, grabbed my jacket. Where are you going? Mom called out, still grinning. I didn't answer. I walked out the front door and into the cold night air, leaving the sound of their laughter behind me. I didn't go home right away. Just drove. No destination. Windows down. Music off. I parked at an empty overlook off Route 14 and sat in silence, watching the city lights shimmer below like they belonged to someone else's life. I sat there for hours. The messages started rolling in around midnight. Where'd you go? You okay? Don't be so sensitive. That last one was from Nate. I didn't respond. Not that night. Not the next day. Something inside me had shifted, and not temporarily. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was just done. That toast, that joke, it was the first time I truly heard how they saw me. Not as a person, not as a son or a brother, just a utility. And the scariest part? They weren't joking. After that night, everything still looked the same on the surface. I went back to work, still answered calls, still paid mom's cell phone bill, still transferred rent money to their account on the first of the month. To them, it was just another cycle. The joke at my birthday wasn't mentioned again. No apology. Not even a nod that maybe, just maybe, it stung. But inside, I was shifting. I started pulling back, not loudly, not in some big dramatic gesture. Quietly, strategically. The first thing I did was accidentally miss a payment for Nate's car insurance. I let him text me 3 times, waited until the tone shifted from casual to accusatory, then replied, "Oh, sorry, I thought you had it covered this month." That was it. No follow-up. He covered it, somehow, and didn't ask again the next month. Then it was the electric bill. I delayed it by a week. Mom messaged me in a panic, said the power company called. I said I'd look into it, and didn't reply for 2 days. By the time I paid it, the lights were already off. She was furious. I just said, "I've been swamped with work," and left it there. They started to notice, not enough to panic, but enough to ask more questions. I played dumb, made vague excuses, blamed workload, burnout, anything to keep it gray. Meanwhile, I was making real moves behind the scenes. I sold my condo, quietly, transferred the funds to a private account they didn't know about, started liquidating things, old furniture, electronics, random stuff I'd collected out of obligation. I gave a fake forwarding address to the post office. Set up a P.O. box 2 counties over. I wiped my digital footprint. Changed passwords, unsubscribed from shared services. Got a new number, but kept the old one active, forwarding to voicemail so I could still monitor the fallout. Every step made me breathe easier. Like I was peeling off layers of a heavy, wet coat I didn't realize I'd been wearing for years. The hardest part wasn't the logistics. It was the guilt. Every time I ignored a voicemail from my mom sobbing about the thermostat not working, or a text from Nate saying he might lose his mind if he didn't get help with rent, a part of me still twisted. But then I'd remind myself, they're not crying over losing me. They're crying over losing access. I wasn't their son. I was their backup plan. And now, I was exiting the plan. I picked a city over 1,000 miles away. Somewhere quiet. Cheap rent. No connections. A place to start over, anonymously. On my last night in town, I sat in my empty apartment on the floor, eating takeout, surrounded by packed boxes and silence. I looked around and thought, this was never home. Just a base camp for fixing other people's messes. I left at sunrise. No goodbye note. No explanation. Just gone. The first few weeks in my new city felt surreal. I wasn't used to silence. I'd wake up expecting a dozen missed calls or some passive-aggressive text chain. But my phone stayed quiet. The old number was still running, feeding voicemails into a folder I rarely checked. I kept tabs from a distance, like watching a car crash in slow motion. At first, they didn't realize I was gone. Not really. They assumed I was pulling away to teach a lesson, probably betting I'd come back after a week of sulking. When the money didn't hit Mom's account on the first of the month, she texted, "Hey, you forget the rent?" I didn't reply. 3 days later, she wrote, "Please don't do this." Then silence. A week passed. Then 2. I listened to a voicemail where Nate said, "You made your point. We get it." But they didn't. Not yet. By the end of the month, the tone shifted. They weren't angry. They were scared. I got a message from Dad, a man who hadn't called me in years. Just wrote, "I need to talk to you. Please." Short. Tense. Not like him. Then came Jenna. She's my cousin on my mom's side. Always the one person in the family who treated me like a human. She messaged from a new number, asking if I was okay. I ignored it. A few days later, she sent, "They're falling apart." It was true. I logged into the shared utility portal, the one I used to manage their bills. 2 months unpaid. Notices stacked. The mortgage was behind by 45 days. Nate had posted a GoFundMe claiming unexpected hardship and asking for help to keep his car. They had no clue what to do. Watching it unfold from a distance, I thought I'd feel guilty. Maybe some twinge of panic or regret. But mostly, I felt calm. Detached curiosity, like watching strangers scramble in a storm they always assumed I'd shield them from. For once, the weight wasn't on me. The sky could fall, and I didn't have to catch it. That alone felt like freedom. They started messaging Jenna next, asking if she'd heard from me. She said no. Played dumb. She told me later she was proud of me, that someone in this family needed to break the cycle. That meant more than she knew. Still, I didn't reach out. I didn't miss them. I missed who I wanted them to be, but not who they were. I started sleeping better, eating better, meeting people who didn't know me as the reliable fixer. I was just Aaron, not a title, not a role, not a bank. But a small part of me kept waiting for the moment they'd realize I was never the problem, just the patch over their cracks. And without me, the whole house was starting to collapse. I didn't enjoy their pain, but I didn't feel responsible for it anymore. And that was new. It had been almost 3 months since I vanished. I was building something close to a real-life, quiet, modest mind. A job that didn't bleed me dry. Evenings spent alone without dread. I took long walks, cooked my own meals, made playlists with no interruptions. The silence, once eerie, had turned peaceful. Then Jenna showed up. She didn't announce it. Just knocked on my apartment door on a gray Thursday afternoon. I froze when I saw her through the peephole. For a second, I considered pretending I wasn't home. But my guilt wouldn't let me. I opened the door. Her eyes welled up the moment she saw me. She didn't cry, though. Just walked in, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "I'm so glad you're okay." We sat on my couch for over an hour. She didn't grill me or scold me. Just listened while I talked, really talked. I told her everything. The years of carrying everyone, the exhaustion, the birthday toast, the way no one ever really saw me. She didn't try to defend them. Just nodded, said, "I get it." That was all I needed. Before she left, she handed me an envelope. "From your mom," she said. I stared at it like it might explode. She added, "I don't think she knows what she's asking in there. But I promised I'd give it to you." I waited until I was alone to open it. It wasn't long, just a few pages, handwritten in her messy cursive. It started with "Dear Aaron," but didn't go anywhere I hadn't predicted. She said she missed me, that things were hard without me, that Nate was struggling, that Dad was trying, that the house felt empty and cold, that she didn't sleep well anymore. There was no apology, no ownership, no acknowledgement of the weight I carried for years. Just lines like, "You've always been the strong one. I don't know why you left so suddenly. This family needs you." And the one that stung the most, "Please don't punish us for being imperfect." As if my silence was some cruel vendetta, not self-preservation. As if walking away from pain made me the villain. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into the drawer of my nightstand. Not because I planned to reread it. Because I needed to keep it, to remind myself of how far I'd come. Of how even now, even in their desperation, they still didn't see me. They saw what I gave them. What I was to them. Not who I am. I didn't write back. I didn't call. I didn't let Jenna deliver a message. I just let the silence continue. Because silence was the only thing that ever made them listen, and even then, they still managed to hear only what they wanted. The shift came fast, almost overnight. Their messages, once drenched in guilt and worry, hardened into something colder, angrier. Like silence had expired as a valid form of protest, and now it was time for consequences. It started with Nate. He emailed me directly, a long, rambling rant about how I had abandoned the family, how I left them in a crisis, how everything was falling apart, and it was my fault. One line stuck with me. "You owe us more than this, Aaron." Oh, that word sat in my chest like a stone, as if my years of sacrifice had been a down payment, as if I signed some invisible contract for eternal servitude. He went on to list every bill I'd ever paid, every time I came through, not as appreciation, but as evidence, proof that I was, in his words, the responsible one, and therefore obligated. He wrote, "It's not fair that you get to just walk away." He actually believed that. Mom followed next, but hers was more subtle. Voicemails layered with sobs, each one wrapping accusation and sorrow. "I don't know how you turned so cold," she said in one. In another, "Families don't do this to each other." Funny. I used to think that too. Then came the email from Dad. Just 2 lines. "You made your point. Come home. Enough of the drama." Drama. That's how he saw it. Not a breakdown. Not a reckoning. Just me throwing a tantrum. I didn't reply to any of them. Not because I didn't have words, but because they didn't deserve them. Not anymore. But I knew something was shifting beneath the surface. That desperation was mutating into something more dangerous. And I was right. A week later, I got served. An actual legal notice. They were suing me for financial abandonment, citing an implied agreement of support. It was ludicrous. A mess of baseless claims and handwritten timelines of expenses, all under the pretense that I had an ongoing duty to provide. At first, I laughed. Then I got a lawyer. She was sharp, young, and deeply unimpressed with their case. She said, "This looks more like revenge than a lawsuit." I agreed. We got to work. I gathered every transfer record, every email, every text from the past decade, every bill I'd covered, every time I stepped in while they stepped back. I built my own timeline, one they couldn't rewrite. And as I scrolled through years of transactions, I felt it again. Not guilt, not anger, clarity. This was never about love. It was about control. And for the first time, they couldn't control me anymore. They were angry because I had stopped feeding the machine, and they didn't know how to survive without me. The lawsuit wasn't about money. It was about punishing my freedom. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Because I had facts. I had receipts. And most importantly, I had nothing left to lose. The courtroom was quiet, sterile, the kind of place where truth and performance blur together under fluorescent lights. I sat behind my attorney, dressed in a simple black shirt and blazer, hands folded, calm. My parents and Nate were on the other side. They looked small, tired, still wearing the same smug righteousness I'd grown up under, like the world owed them. And I was just another disappointment in a long list. The judge read the complaint out loud. Plaintiffs alleged the defendant, their adult son, abandoned a long-standing financial duty. I almost laughed, but I didn't. I let my attorney handle it. She laid out a methodical, airtight defense. Printouts of bank transfers. Screenshots of text messages with their requests and my responses. Voicemails from my mother crying for help, not one of them asking if I was okay. She walked through the timeline year by year. "You'll see, Your Honor, my client paid for car repairs at 22, rent at 24, tuition for his younger brother at 26. The plaintiffs never signed an agreement. There was no contract. Just obligation passed off as love." Then she paused, looked at them, and when he finally stopped giving, they accused him of betrayal. Not because they were abandoned, but because they lost access. My father shook his head like it was all lies. My mom stared at her lap. Nate didn't even look at me. The judge didn't take long. The claim was dismissed. No appeal. No payout. No courtroom lecture about family obligations. Just a swift ruling and a gavel knock that felt like thunder in my chest. Afterward, they waited for me in the hallway. I saw them before they saw me, standing near the vending machines, looking older than I remembered. My mom stepped forward first. "Aaron, please." I stopped a few feet away. "No closer. You can't just cut us off forever," she said. Her voice cracked on forever, like the idea was too cruel to accept. I didn't yell, didn't cry, just said the one thing I knew they'd never be able to hear. "I didn't cut you off. I stopped bleeding for people who never bothered to stop the wound." My dad scoffed, turned his back. Nate muttered, "Unbelievable." I walked past them without another word. Outside, the sun was warm on my face. I took a deep breath, the first I'd taken in weeks that didn't carry the weight of history. That night, I went home. Not to an apartment cluttered with other people's problems, but to my space, my life. I made dinner, poured a glass of wine, sat in the quiet and listened to nothing but my own thoughts. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel selfish. I felt free.